So, picture this Father's Day, right? And my family hands me this trophy that says, most likely to hold everyone back. Yeah, a real laugh riot for them, not so much for me. And here's the thing, that little plastic thing. It wasn't just a joke. It was a spark for a plan they had no clue about. But before we dive in, where are you watching from today? Stick around, because what happens next, well, you're not going to want to miss it. The smell of lighter fluid and cheap charcoal hung thick in the humid June air, clinging to my clothes and drifting into my hair. It was Father's Day, and as it had been for the past 22 years, I was the one manning the grill. The irony wasn't lost on me, not at all. Our father had been gone since I was 20, and somehow that meant it was my job to pick up all the pieces of a life none of us had really asked for. I flipped the patties with a hand that was steady on the outside, but inside, it felt like a storm was raging. The heat from the grill was nothing compared to the heat simmering in my chest, the weight of responsibilities, the quiet exhaustion that never really left. I had been the one to console Mom when her grief was a raw, open wound. Maria, 42 then, completely lost. Her eyes vacant in that way that made you want to grab her and never let go. I had raised Lucy, barely 4 years old at the time, her tiny hands clutching mine while she learned about life before she even really knew what that meant. Ben, just a baby then, had somehow been mine to look after too. A little person who depended on me for every meal, every laugh, every lesson. It wasn't supposed to be this way. You know, not when you're 20, full of your own dreams, scholarships lined up, the whole world stretching out before you. And yet, there I was, shackled by circumstance and by choice, because someone had to keep this family standing. Someone had to keep the roof over our heads, the lights on, and the fridge full. I remember the first time I walked into the bank on my own, papers in hand, trying to negotiate with people who didn't care that I was 2 decades younger than them. Negotiating the family debt, stopping foreclosure, clawing my way through the numbers while my peers were jetting off to study abroad, sipping cappuccinos in Florence, laughing at life's trivialities. I didn't get to laugh. I didn't get to choose. My dreams were shelved neatly, wrapped in my sense of duty, and stored on a metaphorical shelf where they gathered dust. And yet, here I was again, the grill sizzling, sweat soaking through my polo shirt, the burgers smelling like they might be okay. If I could just ignore the storm inside me. I had bought the meat. I had paid the mortgage. I had refilled the propane tank just hours earlier. And now I was flipping these patties while my family lounged in the shade of the patio umbrella, sipping craft beers I'd picked out, comfortable in the shade, enjoying the life I had created for them without so much as a thought for myself. The laughter floated through the humid air, and I couldn't tell whether it made my chest tighten from pride or from sheer irritation. "Steph, you're burning them." Lucy's voice rang out from the patio, trilling with that teasing note she'd perfected over the years. My hand didn't falter. I smiled, calm, but inside, my stomach was knotting. They had no idea what went into keeping this house running, what it took to make sure every single piece of our shattered family didn't completely fall apart. I was the one who had abandoned my own life, my scholarships, my ambitions, all for this, for them, for a roof, a table, a bed. And here I was, invisible, the ever-present scaffolding holding them up. Mom said nothing. Of course. She never did. Her quiet smile, that vague, pleasant expression she wore whenever she sensed conflict and wanted to distance herself, was plastered across her face. Ben hid behind his phone, probably laughing, maybe wondering why I didn't just relax like everyone else. And Lucy, 26 now, everything that I was not, carefree, beautiful, ambitious, utterly unburdened by responsibility. She clapped her hands, silencing the chatter, and her eyes sparkled in a way that made me remember all the years I had carried her. She was a bright force in the room, light and free, while I was anchored to the table, to the grill, to all the responsibilities that no one else seemed to notice. We were celebrating Father's Day without our father, and yet, as I looked at the platter of burgers, the salads, the neatly arranged condiments, I realized I was doing everything he once did. Only now the weight was entirely mine. I had been the constant, the stabilizer, the invisible pillar of this family. I had carried the grief, the bills, the life lessons, the food, the school applications, the braces, the tuition, the mortgage, all of it. And I had done it quietly, because that was what was expected, what was necessary. The irony burned. Here I was, the one who had given up everything to keep them afloat. Flipping burgers while they laughed and sipped beer, oblivious to the invisible strings I pulled every single day to make sure they could live comfortably. I watched them, felt that sharp mix of pride, exhaustion, and if I was honest, resentment, not the kind that erupts in shouting matches or confrontations, but the quiet, simmering kind that sits in your chest and reminds you how much you've given, how often you've been overlooked. And as I carried the last tray over to the picnic table, wiping sweat from my brow, my mind flickered to the years spent negotiating with banks, filing paperwork, balancing ledgers, paying bills, teaching lessons, tucking in my siblings, consoling my mother. Every little task, every little sacrifice built into the life they now enjoyed, all while they laughed and joked and were blissfully unaware of the work behind it. It was the ultimate irony, the quietest humiliation, and yet I stayed. I had to stay. I was the glue, the family's invisible backbone. And on this humid June day, as the smell of charred meat mingled with a heavy scent of responsibility, I realized something that had been true for years. I had carried them all, and no one, not even for a second, had thought about carrying me. Okay, so the moment came. Lucy clapped her hands, silencing everyone, her eyes sparkling like she had the world figured out, and I felt this tight knot in my stomach. Ben, sweet-faced Ben, stood up holding something wrapped in a kitchen towel. I could see the lumpy shape, the awkwardness of it, and for a split second, I thought, maybe it's a joke. But then, he pulled the towel away, and there it was, a hideous homemade trophy. A plastic baseball figure spray-painted gold, glued crookedly to a block of wood. On a small brass-colored plaque, in a shaky, uneven hand, were the words, most likely to hold everyone back. Time slowed. The birds, the distant lawnmower, even the chatter of the neighbors, it all seemed to fade into a sharp, piercing silence. I stared at the trophy, then at their faces, and it hit me, not as humor, but as something colder, something intentional. Ben was giggling, but nervously, unable to meet my eyes. Mom, as usual, wore her placid smile, that same non-committal expression she always wore when conflict brewed nearby. Marco was smirking, his eyes bright with triumph. that predator's glint that made my blood run cold. And Lucy was laughing, not a little chuckle. No, it was loud, unrestrained, head thrown back, hand clutching Marco's arm. It was the laugh of someone delivering the perfect punchline. And, I knew in that instant it wasn't funny. Not for me. I felt the heat rise in my face, a deep, painful blush from collar to hairline. Humiliation, sharp and searing, cut through me. I'd been overlooked, ignored, taken for granted. But this was new, refined cruelty. They were all waiting for me to laugh, to be the good sport, to join in. My mind raced. Was this about that argument 2 nights ago, the fight about funding her high-risk crypto scheme? Probably. They thought they were clever. They thought I was blind to their little schemes. But I wasn't. I reached out slowly, as if the act of touching the trophy might dissolve it somehow, and took it from Ben. Light, cheap, insulting. I forced my lips into a smile. "Wow," I said, my voice even deliberate. "I don't know what to say. Thank you." Ben laughed nervously. Relief, evident in his body language. Marco clapped me on the shoulder, a gesture more shove than pat. "See, she gets it. Good sport, Steph. Just a joke, honey." Mom finally chimed in, her voice soft and practiced. "You know we love you." Lucy's voice, sweet but dripping with mock innocence, followed. "Yeah, Steph, we just want you to, loosen up, live a little. Let us live a little." I nodded. I kept that smile plastered on my face while every nerve in my body screamed. Inside, the tension was electric. My mind ran through 22 years of sleepless nights, sacrificed dreams, missed opportunities, the grinding weight of keeping this family alive while being invisible, always expected, rarely thanked. And now, this trophy, this plastic insult, this declaration of all I supposedly was, sat in my hand. I could feel the message, the betrayal they were giving me, a taste of my place in their eyes. I was the obstacle, the one holding them back, and it stung. Not because of the plastic, but because of the truth in their perception. For a moment, I considered dropping it, letting it hit the ground, shattering their expectation of me as always compliant, always accommodating. But I didn't. I stayed calm. I stayed measured. I said nothing more. Just let them fill the air with their laughter, their false sweetness, their staged camaraderie. It was all theater, and I was watching from the front row, not participating. The silence that followed Lucy's laughter lingered, uncomfortable, heavy, stretching across the patio. I looked from Lucy's triumphant grin to Marco's smug satisfaction, to Ben's uneasy giggles, to Mom's quiet avoidance, and I realized, really realized, that this wasn't just a joke. It wasn't just a roast. It was a calculated message, a test, a challenge. They wanted to see my reaction. They wanted to see me bend. But here's the thing, I wasn't bending anymore. I smiled, kept my voice steady, and in that moment, I decided that their little victory, their moment of mockery, would not define me. Not now. Not ever. And so, I held that trophy, light and cheap in my hands, as their laughter faded into background noise. My mind already working, already planning, already knowing that the day this plastic joke became the spark for a reckoning was the day everything would change. The trophy wasn't just a trophy. It was a message, and I understood it completely. I sat on my childhood bed that night, the trophy perched on the dresser where I had placed it moments ago. The cheap gold paint was already flaking, revealing the white plastic underneath. I stared at it, long and hard, and for the first time really saw what it represented. Not just a joke, not just a roast. It was entitlement. It was betrayal. It was the culmination of 22 years of my life quietly given away while they thought I was holding them back. And, well, maybe in a sense I was, but not for the reasons they imagined. The weight of it pressed down on me, colder than I expected. I wasn't crying. I wasn't raging. I was calm. That calm that comes after exhaustion, after doing everything for everyone else and realizing, finally, it doesn't have to be this way anymore. The anger simmered under the surface, but it was methodical, precise, not impulsive. I knew what needed to happen. I had been invisible long enough. I had been the caretaker, the financial backbone, the stabilizer, the one who made sure the family could breathe while I suffocated silently. And now, the moment had come. They didn't see it. They couldn't, and that ignorance that was mine to enjoy. I opened my suitcase and began to pack. Only essentials, my work laptop, personal files, clothes for a few weeks, toiletries. Everything else stayed behind. The furniture I had bought, the photos of family moments, carefully framed, the kitchen appliances I had paid for, all of it left. My key went on the kitchen counter next to a simple 3-word note. I am done. The house was silent when I left, just before 5. No one stirred, no one noticed. It felt surreal. I closed the door behind me, slid into the quiet morning air, and for the first time, I realized that no one was responsible for me. No one was relying on me to hold everything together. Not Mom, not Lucy, not Ben. The freedom was terrifying, pure. It hit me like a cold wave. I had been a ghost in my own life, and now, finally, I was materializing. Every decision, every dollar, every sacrifice, gone. And yet, I felt light, almost unrecognizable. A clarity I hadn't known in decades settled over me. The irony wasn't lost on me. All those years, I had been the one keeping the family afloat, quietly and diligently. And they thought the trophy was a statement. They had no idea the real leverage I had. I wasn't doing this out of malice. I wasn't punishing anyone. I was reclaiming control over my life. The trophy had merely highlighted the disparity between what they saw and what was true. It was a spark. Yes, but the fire had been smoldering inside me for years, waiting. I checked into a modest, anonymous extended stay hotel in the business district near my office. Not a home, not a haven, but a blank slate. I unpacked my small bag, set up my laptop, and sat on the firm, unfamiliar bed as the sun began to rise. Gray and purple streaks painted the skyline, a quiet signal that the world was still moving. But in this room, in this moment, I was no longer tethered to anyone's expectations. I was responsible only for myself, and for the first time, it felt right. I spent the next 48 hours in suspended animation, room service, movies I couldn't remember, sleep that had been denied for decades. I was waiting, reflecting, recalibrating. Every call I imagined, every attempt to reach me, I would handle methodically, on my terms. The silence was a balm, a space I hadn't known I needed. And I understood, more clearly than ever, that this act leaving, stepping away wasn't impulsive. It was inevitable. The trophy hadn't created this. It had revealed it. and I was ready. As the sun climbed higher, I felt that cold determination settle into my bones. Freedom wasn't soft, it wasn't gentle, it was sharp, precise, a line drawn through decades of sacrifice, and there was no going back. Every moment, every memory, every bill I had paid, every lesson taught, every tear wiped it all had led to this one unambiguous truth. I am done being the invisible force in everyone else's story. I am done letting their perceptions dictate my life. And while I knew this freedom would provoke panic, anger, and confusion, I didn't flinch. I wasn't leaving them to starve or fail. I was leaving them to see the consequences of entitlement unchecked, to understand the reality of independence for themselves. The trophy was still in my mind, light, cheap, insulting, yet powerful, a monument almost to their blindness and my long-forgotten resolve. It had taken a simple plastic effigy to crystallize decades of clarity. I leaned back, sipping mediocre hotel coffee, looking out at the city that belonged entirely to me for the first time. The house, the responsibility, the silent servitude, it all stayed behind, just as the sun climbed over the rooftops, and with it, the knowledge that I was no longer part of the machinery that ran their lives. I was my own person. The decision was mine, the path forward was mine, and in that cold, quiet, early morning, I felt the exhilarating weight of freedom settle around me like armor. The trophy had sparked it, but the fire was entirely, irrevocably mine. 2 nights after the barbecue, Lucy and Marco cornered me in the kitchen. The fluorescent light flickered overhead, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch the tension in the room. Lucy's eyes were wide, sparkling with that desperate excitement she always carried when she thought she'd discovered a shortcut to success. Marco leaned casually against the counter, designer sneakers squeaking slightly as he shifted, cologne overpowering, that slick smile plastered on his face. He started before I could even form a word. "Steph, this is huge. The next big NFT token, pre-launch, disruptive. You've got to be in on this." Lucy bounced on her heels, nearly vibrating with urgency. "Just 75,000, Steph. That's all we need to get in on the ground floor. Marco says it'll triple. Honestly, I promise. This is our way out, our future." I froze, letting it all hang there for a beat. 75,000. They wanted me to leverage the house I had spent 2 decades paying off. The roof that had sheltered us through grief and chaos, for some unregulated, uninsured token. My mind raced through every red flag, every inconsistency, every subtle flicker in Marco's expression that betrayed his desperation beneath that polished exterior. I didn't respond immediately. I leaned back against the counter, arms crossed. "Let me get this straight," I said finally, calm but steady. "You want me to risk the house, the only thing keeping this family stable on a speculative asset that isn't even guaranteed to exist yet? That's your plan?" Marco's smirk wavered for a fraction of a second. Then he leaned in, voice dripping charm, trying to convince, to dominate. "Stephanie, you don't see the potential. This is the future. Agile, disruptive. You've got to be flexible, adapt. That's how you win." I kept my gaze locked on him, outwardly calm, inwardly simmering. 22 years of carrying this family, managing the bills, the grief, the chaos, had honed my instincts. I knew Marco's type: instantly flashy, loud, all buzzwords and bravado, but no substance. 2 failed LLCs, dissolved for unpaid taxes, a subprime leased car, no assets to speak of. Yet he wanted access to the one thing I had built with my own hands, my own sweat, my own sacrifice. And Lucy, bless her, was blind to it. She didn't see the predator lurking in her fiancé's smile. I exhaled slowly, keeping my tone deceptively casual. And where exactly did you expect to get $75,000 from thin air, from a second mortgage? From the house that I've spent my life securing? That's your solution. Lucy's face flickered with confusion, then panic. Steph, it's for the brand launch. Marco says it'll triple. We can finally move out, start our lives. I shook my head, masking frustration and disbelief. No, absolutely not. This isn't finance. It's a lottery ticket disguised as an opportunity. You're asking me to gamble the family's foundation on a flashy presentation and a hopeful projection. Marco's eyes narrowed. Charm abandoned, he snapped. You're holding us back. You're trying to ruin our lives. He stepped closer, but I didn't flinch. Calm, controlled, measured, I had learned how to weather storms like this. No, I said quietly. I'm not holding anyone back. I'm protecting you, Lucy. I've spent 22 years protecting all of you. Lucy's voice trembled, cracking with both fear and frustration. You're controlling. You're punishing us. I let her words hang in the room. I didn't argue. I didn't justify. I analyzed. Every glance, every syllable from Marco, every desperate plea from Lucy. It all told me what I needed to know. They were blind to reality. They didn't understand the foundation I had built, the safeguards, the risks I mitigated every single day. I am not controlling. I am prepared, I said, calm but firm. I am the only one preventing catastrophic mistakes. The house, the finances, the security it isn't yours to gamble. Her chest heaved. Marco's jaw tightened, his facade cracking under the pressure of being denied access to what he assumed was his prize. But you don't understand, he shouted. You're selfish. You're ruining everything. I held my ground, unwavering. I am not ruining anything. I am stopping you from destroying what I built with my own hands, my own labor, my own life. You think this is about control. It isn't. It's about survival. And for once, I am putting my responsibility first. Lucy looked at me, eyes wide, voice trembling. You're just cruel. You don't want us to succeed. You want to hold us back. I stayed still, letting the accusation wash over me. I wasn't blind to her feelings, but I wasn't bending to them either. I saw clearly now the illusions she and Marco had constructed, and I knew stepping back, refusing, protecting the house and the money, was not cruelty. It was clarity, protection, and finally, truth. No, Lucy, I said softly, steel threading my voice. I am not holding you back. I am the only thing that has ever kept this family from collapsing, and I will not let that collapse because someone can't face reality. For a moment, the room was heavy with silence. Marco's face was a mask of fury and panic. Lucy's eyes flickered between disbelief and dawning comprehension. I stayed calm, steady, unmovable. For the first time, I wasn't the invisible force holding everything together. I was a decisive presence, unyielding. And they were about to realize that the person they thought of as an obstacle was, in fact, the only thing preventing disaster. And in that silence, I felt the first wave of empowerment, the first breath of freedom. The first decisive move had been made. I was no longer just the caretaker. I was in control. And they were about to see exactly what that meant. After leaving the house, the hotel room became my command center. I unpacked my laptop, sipped lukewarm coffee, and stared at the blinking cursor on the login screen. Feeling that thrill only comes from knowing exactly what you're about to do. L. Miller Media LLC, the entity no one had ever fully understood, was entirely under my control. Years of careful planning, legal structuring, and meticulous record-keeping meant that I had absolute authority over all corporate accounts, all salary distributions, all operating decisions. And now, Marco and Lucy had no idea. They thought the money they were siphoning off so carelessly was theirs. They thought I was just the family wallflower, the accountant quietly shuffling papers. But I wasn't just shuffling papers anymore. I was moving pieces on a board that had been set for years, waiting for the right time. I started with the corporate accounts. There were two main checking accounts, one for Lucy's operating expenses, her flashy lifestyle of designer clothes, overpriced restaurants, and impulsive subscriptions, and the primary business account where contracts, profits, and brand funds flowed. I logged in, tracing the last withdrawals. Predictably, the operational account was nearly empty. The primary savings, the one that contained the real money, the profits from legitimate brand contracts, carefully insulated from any frivolous spending, was untouched. And it would stay untouched. With a few precise clicks, I transferred the entire balance from the main account into a new escrow account at a different bank, fully locked and requiring only my signature for withdrawal. Not frozen, not hidden, just completely out of their reach. I wasn't stealing anything. I was protecting it from predators they didn't even see yet. Next came the corporate credit cards. There were two of them, the primary card used for legitimate business expenses, and a secondary one issued for operational purposes, which they had abused for luxury purchases. I canceled both, effective immediately. Each cancellation was deliberate, controlled, a reminder that the lifelines I had maintained for years could be severed with precision if the situation demanded. It wasn't about revenge, it was about security, about reasserting control over the things that had been entrusted to me, often without acknowledgement, always without respect. Then there was the planning. I didn't act impulsively. I knew Marco would be dangerous if he felt cornered. And Lucy, blind as she had been, needed the protection of structure and oversight. So, I called David, a private investigator I had used professionally a few times before. Calm, methodical, discreet, exactly what I needed. "David," I said when he answered, "I have a situation. Marco Gallo, engaged to my sister, attempting to gain access to family assets. I need a full financial and criminal workup, credit history, corporate filings, judgments, known associates. Look into any crypto schemes he might be tied to, discreetly but thoroughly." He didn't hesitate. "Consider it done. Stephanie, I'll get back to you with a full report." As I hung up, I felt a thrill of control, a sense of power I hadn't known since my 20s, before life had been so complicated by grief and obligation. Here, finally, I could act purely, decisively, every move calculated, every outcome foreseeable. I wasn't angry. I wasn't vengeful. I was professional, strategic, meticulous. For the next week, I lived in a strange limbo. Each morning, I went to my office, cleared my desk, and formally transitioned ongoing projects to a colleague. I informed my boss I was taking personal leave, citing a family emergency. My request was approved instantly. It was ironic. Really, I had been the model employee, the dependable financial controller, and now that I needed time for myself, the system accommodated me without question. I spent the hours planning, monitoring accounts, cross-referencing transactions, and confirming the setup of my escrow account. Every login, every transfer, every cancellation was a step toward re-establishing the boundaries that had been ignored for far too long. The thrill was not in chaos, it was in order, in knowing precisely how the pieces fit together, how the manipulations of Marco and the blind trust of Lucy could be countered without unnecessary risk. Each step was methodical, measured, deliberate. I reviewed contracts, operating agreements, salary structures, corporate filings. Every document had been set up to ensure that I was the managing member with exclusive authority. Lucy had signed the operating agreement years ago, blissfully unaware of the legal implications. And Marco had assumed that charm and persuasion could override governance. They were wrong. By the end of the week, the situation was entirely under control. Marco's access to funds had been cut. The primary accounts were safe. Salaries were managed strictly through the company's protocols. The funds he had previously thought were his were secured in an escrow account he couldn't touch. The process had been smooth, satisfying, and yet exhilarating. There was a cold, almost addictive thrill in executing the strategy, knowing every click, every login, every call with David had purpose. The trap had been set, the chessboard arranged, and now it was a matter of waiting for the pieces to move as they inevitably would. In those quiet moments, alone in my hotel room, I reflected on how far I had come. From the young woman who had given up scholarships, travel, and a life of freedom to care for a grieving mother and 2 small siblings, to the professional who now held the levers of power with precision and authority. The irony was delicious. The family thought they were entitled to my resources. They thought the trophy had defined me, but now they had no idea that the invisible force they had mocked was entirely in control, fully prepared and entirely untouchable. And as I leaned back, stretching my fingers over the keyboard one last time, I felt the rush of anticipation, the next steps, the confrontations, the revelations they would unfold exactly as they should. Because for the first time, the power wasn't in their hands. It was entirely in mine. I parked on the curb outside the house I had once called home, the place I'd worked so hard to stabilize, the sanctuary that Marco had attempted to exploit. My heart was steady, not from fear, but from a focused, icy determination. I didn't rush in. I didn't pound on doors or shout. I waited. 5 minutes later, a nondescript sedan rolled up behind me. David got out. Professional, calm, carrying a leather briefcase, the kind of presence that demanded attention without needing to speak. He slid into the passenger seat, and I filled him in. Domestic dispute with a high-risk financial element. Marco is unstable. My sister's inside. I'm going in to extract her and present the evidence. You are here to witness, not engage. Understand? He nodded. Crystal clear. We walked up the path I'd weeded countless times, my old key fitting perfectly in the lock. The house smelled faintly of stale air and neglect. Inside, the scene was chaotic. Mom sat on the sofa, silent, weeping quietly. Ben was pale, trembling by the fireplace. And there was Marco, pacing. Phone clamped to his ear, slicked back hair disheveled, the smell of stale beer clinging to him. Lucy was huddled in an armchair, eyes red, posture small and fearful. When I stepped in, followed by David, the room fell into an uneasy silence. Marco's call ended abruptly. He looked up, eyes narrowing first at me, then at David. "What the hell is this? Are you crazy? You brought a stranger into my house?" "This is my associate, David," I said, voice calm, unwavering. "He is here to observe." Lucy bolted to me, clutching my arm. "Did you do it? Did you unfreeze the accounts?" "Yes," I replied. "Steady. Everything is under control." Marco's fury was immediate, his voice rising. You think you can just waltz in here? This is my house. Our house. You can't do this." "It's my house." "Marco," I said flatly. "And you are no longer welcome in it." He bristled, stepping forward, voice trembling with anger. "You can't do that. I'm family. Lucy and I are getting married. You are stealing from us. This is illegal." I walked over to the coffee table, pushing aside a messy stack of his crypto printouts. I opened my file slowly. "Lucy, when I set up L. Miller Media, LLC, you signed the operating agreement. Do you remember that?" She looked confused, uncertainty flickering across her face. "I signed a bunch of bank papers. Yeah." I tapped the first page. "This document names me, Stephanie Miller, as the sole managing member. I hold 100% fiduciary control over all company assets and decisions. You are a salaried consultant, Marco. You and Lucy have no legal claim to any of this. I am not stealing anything. I am protecting company assets from a fraudulent external party." Lucy's face went pale. The blood drained from her cheeks so fast I thought she might faint. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came. Ben's face was white, his eyes wide, Marco's features contorted, disbelief and rage colliding. "You witch," he spat, voice cracking. "You think you're smart? You planned this?" I remained calm. Steady. Professional. "No, I was prepared. Always. I'm a financial controller with 15 years of experience. Everything documented, every move legal, every decision deliberate." He glared at me, flailing. "Sue you? You can't, you don't have the money. His voice faltered. I held up my hand. "You can't even pay your phone bill, Marco, or your car lease, or the $92,000 you owe from previous judgments. Exactly my point." Marco froze. His composure crumbled. Lucy's eyes widened further, horror dawning, realization settling in. She had trusted him blindly, and now the truth landed like a hammer. I turned to her. "Lucy, look at these documents." Ben, shaking, took a folder. His hands were trembling as he read aloud each judgment. Apex Capital versus Marco, $35,000, Acme Investments, $22,000, and another breach of contract, $35,000. Each paper was a dagger to the facade they had built. Mom's face went white for the first time, pure fear settling in. She had finally realized this wasn't a matter she could mediate. This was serious, and it was beyond her control. Marco lunged, flailing, attempting to seize the papers. David stepped in, immovable, calm, a human barrier between chaos and order. "These are matters of public record, Marco," I said, voice cold as steel. "You are a serial fraud, broke, and deeply in debt. Your cryptocurrency platform is a sham. The website was registered anonymously 6 weeks ago. Everything you promised is a lie. Lucy, trembling, whispered, He loves me. He wouldn't. I turned to the final document, saved for the sharpest blow. A bank statement with a wire transfer highlighted, a printout of an email confirming the deposit to Marco's crypto wallet, $10,000, meant for a wedding deposit that was gone. Lucy, I said, voice steady, cold. He took the $10,000 you gave him for your venue. There is no deposit. There is no venue. There is only proof of theft. He has been lying to you every step of the way. The sound she made wasn't a cry. It was raw, animalistic, a mix of disbelief, betrayal, and absolute rage. She scrambled to her feet, fists pounding his chest. You thief, you liar, I trusted you, I loved you, you stole from me. Her scream echoed through the room, the emotional culmination of manipulation and deceit unraveling before her eyes. Marco's panic became violent. He shoved her away, trying to regain control. It was my money, I earned it. You're nothing without me. Get out. I stepped forward, calm, unshaken, voice low but cutting through the chaos like a blade. You'll pay for this. You have 2 options. Walk out right now with nothing, or stay and face criminal charges for wire fraud, misrepresentation, and theft. My associate, David, has already packaged all evidence for the district attorney. He stared, chest heaving, calculating, looking from Lucy to Mom to Ben to me, the person they had underestimated. His posture faltered. Every thread he could muster crumbled under the weight of facts, documentation, and legal inevitability. Silence engulfed the room, finally, without another word. He snatched his keys and stormed out, slamming the front door with a gunshot-like echo. The house was still. Lucy collapsed into Ben's arms, sobbing. Mom's eyes remained wide, fearful but silently relieved. And I stood there, the calm in the storm, the orchestrator who had dismantled the fantasy and exposed the truth. My heart still raced, adrenaline fading into bone-deep exhaustion. But clarity settled over me. The confrontation was over. The predator unmasked, the lies laid bare, and the family finally facing reality. For the first time in years, the house was mine, the accounts secure, and I was the only one fully aware of the power and responsibility that control brought. I took a slow breath, surveyed the room, and felt the quiet, undeniable satisfaction of order restored, justice served, and truth revealed. 2 days after the showdown at the house, I scheduled a family meeting, this time at the lawyer's office. The space was sterile, formal, and intimidating in a way that made it clear this was business, not a family argument. Mom, Lucy, and Ben arrived, each carrying a different weight. Lucy looked hollow, her usual brightness dimmed. Ben shifted, nervously, fidgeting with his hands. My mother's expression was a mix of worry and fragile hope. I sat at the head of the table, calm, deliberate, with Mr. Harrison, our lawyer, seated beside me. Stacks of neatly organized folders lay before us. "Thank you for coming," I said, voice steady. "This won't take long. I want everything to be clear, final, and legally sound. No confusion, no misunderstanding." "Mr." Harrison cleared his throat. "Ms. Miller has retained our firm to manage the dissolution of 2 key assets, Elm Miller Media LLC and the family home on Elm Street." Mom's gasp was audible. "The house, Stephanie. No, you can't." "I can, Mom. I replied softly but firmly. And I am. The emotional cost of keeping it is too high. It will be put in the market next week. Her voice trembled. Where will we live? I slid a folder toward Lucy. First, the LLC, after a full audit and accounting for funds lost due to Marco's mismanagement, which we are pursuing in civil court, the LLC has a remaining net asset value. Per my instructions, it will be dissolved. Its debts are being paid. A small portion of the remaining funds will be released to you. Lucy? Mr. Harrison handed her a check. Lucy stared at it, stunned. I let a silence fill the room. She hadn't expected the reality. 5,000, I said flatly. After your brand launch, car lease, and Marco's theft, this is what's left. It's more than legally required. Enough for a fresh start. What you do with it is your choice. She didn't speak. Her eyes went wide, processing the limits of her access, the consequences of past actions. Ben shifted uneasily, seeing the reality that responsibility now rested on his own shoulders. He was quiet, but I could tell he was absorbing the magnitude. Mr. Harrison continued. As for the proceeds from the house sale, Miss, Miller has instructed me to create an irrevocable trust for your mother, Maria. The entirety of the proceeds will be placed in this trust, managed by a neutral third-party trustee to cover her housing and medical needs for the rest of her life. Mom looked at me, confusion mixing with relief. A trust. It means you're taken care of, Mom, I explained gently. You'll have a comfortable apartment, all bills paid, and no financial worries. But the principal cannot be touched, not by you, not by Lucy, not by Ben. It's solely for your care. Ben finally spoke, hesitating. Steph, what about my tuition? It's due. I met his gaze, calm but firm. I've paid for your education for the past 3 years. Now, it's time for you to take responsibility. Apply for loans, get a part-time job, or both. Your portion of family support ends today. His face flushed. Shame mingled with a sobering truth. For years, he had depended on me. Now, he had to navigate his own path. Lucy finally lifted her gaze from the check, eyes pale, realizing she wasn't just losing funds, she was confronting accountability. She wasn't pleading anymore. She was staring at a sister she had underestimated, seeing someone who had quietly carried the family for decades. You thought of all this, she whispered, disbelief in her voice. Yes, Lucy, I said softly, steady. I thought of everything. That was my job, the one you made a joke of with that trophy. The room remained quiet, heavy with realization. The climax of our family conflict wasn't loud, it wasn't messy, it was methodical, clear, and irrevocable. The responsibilities had been redistributed, protections put in place, consequences assigned. Mom was secure, Lucy and Ben faced limits, and I had drawn final, unambiguous boundaries. Mr. Harrison began to slide documents across the table, explaining the dissolution of the LLC, the mechanics of the house sale, and the trust. I monitored every step, clarified details, and ensured everyone understood the process. My voice remained calm, my presence steady, reinforcing that this was final, deliberate, and irreversible. Each action strengthened my sense of closure, my empowerment, my clarity. Lucy's shoulders slumped. She finally absorbed the reality that the luxury she had assumed was hers to manipulate was gone, and with it, the illusions she had built around independence and entitlement, Ben's posture straightened, acknowledging for the first time that he was responsible for navigating his own life. Mom's face softened, relief and gratitude shining through her worry, understanding that she would be taken care of without the family dynamics devolving into chaos. I gave them space, letting the silence stretch, allowing them to process. There were no screams, no tears of anger, just the dawning weight of reality. They were beginning to understand, finally, that life had boundaries and responsibility was not optional. By the time the meeting ended, the room had shifted. The tension remained. But it was no longer chaotic. It was sober, reflective, and grounded. Each family member had confronted a piece of truth Mom would be cared for without interference. Lucy and Ben faced their independence, and I had, once and for all, reasserted my authority and responsibility with clarity and fairness. As we left the office, I felt a profound sense of relief. The responsibility that had weighed on me for decades now had a framework, a legal and practical boundary. My sense of empowerment was overwhelming. The difficult decisions had been made, executed with precision. I had secured protection, enforced accountability, and drawn lines that could not be crossed again. The weight of past sacrifices transformed into clarity, strength, and closure. Walking out, I realized the liberation wasn't just financial, it was emotional and psychological. Years of silent labor, careful oversight, and unacknowledged support had culminated in this moment. The family would have to navigate their own paths now, under the structure I had established, and my role as the invisible pillar had ended. The meeting didn't just formalize the legal and financial aspects, it sealed a new equilibrium, one where boundaries, responsibility, and fairness replaced dependency and entitlement. For the first time, I left a family meeting feeling complete. Not triumphant in a dramatic sense, but serene in the knowledge that decades of careful planning and tough decisions had achieved what had to be done. The dissolution of the LLC, the sale of the house, and the trust for Mom ensured security, fairness, and clarity. And I, finally, felt the quiet power and freedom of having done exactly what was necessary, with precision, integrity, and unwavering resolve. After the legal and financial dust settled, life quietly shifted. Marco vanished, ghosted from our lives as swiftly as he had entered. His flashy car was repossessed, creditors probably gnashing teeth somewhere far away, and the scam that had threatened to upend our family dissolved with him. The house sold in decent condition, the trust for Mom in place. Ben on his own path with tuition and responsibility settled into a rhythm. Lucy, humbled and raw, slowly adjusted to the reality of independence and consequences, learning to manage life one paycheck at a time. For me, the change was profound. I moved into a small, sleek apartment downtown. It was mine, completely mine, every detail chosen with intention, a space that reflected me, not anyone else's idea of comfort or need. I started a new job, a higher-paying, more challenging role as CFO at a tech startup. Travel became part of my routine, meetings with new people, building networks, living life fully on my terms. For the first time, I was accountable only to myself. It was terrifying at first, the freedom, but it was also exhilarating. Lucy began to rebuild too. A couple months after the family meeting, she asked to meet me in a public park halfway between our apartments. Coffee in hand, we sat on a bench, the air crisp, quiet, a space for reflection. She had taken a real job, entry-level marketing at a small firm. Pay wasn't great, but it was hers. No strings attached. She looked calm, noticeably changed. She admitted her mistakes, apologized with an honesty that had been absent before. And I listened. I forgave. But it wasn't about wiping the slate clean. It was about acknowledging growth, change, and the truth of our shared past. Ben stabilized as well. He managed his responsibilities, part-time jobs, schoolwork, and slowly built independence. Conversations with him became about life and goals, not finances and obligations. My role shifted entirely from caretaker to sister and occasional advisor. We communicated with more honesty, less expectation. It was a relief, subtle and steady, to interact as equals rather than through the lens of long-held dependency. Mom thrived in her new living situation. Her apartment was comfortable, bills handled, her life structured without the weight of past financial stress. She called regularly, sharing mundane joys like bingo nights or new neighbors. And the contentment in her voice reminded me why I had made the hard decisions. Protecting her had been a priority, but seeing her happiness now, secure and independent in her own way, was a quiet, profound reward. As for me, life's pace felt different. There were no long barbecues with the weight of unseen obligations pressing down. No phone calls demanding immediate financial action, just quiet mornings, decisions for myself, career growth, and the slow, deliberate shaping of a life unburdened by others' entitlement. I traveled for work, met people I chose, and explored paths that had been closed off for decades. Independence was no longer theoretical. It was real, tangible, and deeply satisfying. Yet, I held on to memories, reflections, and even small, symbolic remnants of the past. One evening, unpacking the last of my office boxes, I came across the old trophy, the cheap, gold-painted plastic effigy that had set all this in motion. I held it for a moment, feeling the weight, the years of resentment, responsibility, and the chain of events it represented. And then I walked to the trash chute, lifted it, and let it go. The sound of it clattering into the darkness was oddly liberating. It wasn't just a piece of plastic. It was the symbol of what had bound me, and now, finally, it disappeared. I returned inside, poured a glass of wine, and sat on the balcony overlooking the city lights. The hum of life below, people moving in countless directions, somehow mirrored my own sense of renewal. I was 42, and my life felt like it was just beginning. Free, entirely, completely free. The past, with all its weight, had been acknowledged, processed, and respectfully laid to rest. The future was mine to shape, guided by experience, wisdom, and a quiet confidence that had taken decades to cultivate. In those quiet evenings, sipping wine, reflecting on the journey, I felt a mixture of relief, satisfaction, and curiosity. Relief that the chaos of entitlement and deception had been contained. Satisfaction in the strategic clarity of my decisions, and curiosity for what the next chapter would bring. Life was no longer a series of obligations imposed upon me. It was a canvas I could paint on, each decision mine alone, deliberate and intentional. And in that freedom, there was peace, contentment, and finally, the full sense of being in control of my own destiny. Looking back, It's wild how a little plastic trophy ended up changing everything. It showed me the hidden struggles I'd carried for years, and how reclaiming control can feel terrifying and freeing all at once. I've learned to set boundaries, trust myself, and embrace independence. Life's messy, but sometimes chaos leads to clarity. If you enjoyed this story, stick around for more stories like this, where ordinary moments turn into life-changing lessons. There's always something to reflect on, right?